The topic that I will be exploring today, or explaining to you, or describing what we are trying to do on the documentation side, is an effort to automate our documentation PR reviews. I had a dry run yesterday, and I was told that there's no in my slides, so sorry about that. I didn't have time to fix that. Also, while many of you have had the chance to explore AI technology in a lot of ways, and you've come up with wonderful workflows that, quite frankly, I sometimes have trouble comprehending, some of us are only just beginning. So I'm one of those people, so please keep that in mind. This is not some fancy, super extra new thing that will change your lives, but I'm hoping that, at least for some of you, this might be the thing that will help you get started with AI in the beginning. Also, the project that I'm introducing is still very fresh. It's not finished, and it's still ongoing. So this is sort of an early sneak peek of what we're trying. Keep that in mind, don't judge me too much. So I will start with the what and the why. What is a documentation PR review? What do you look for when you're reviewing documentation PRs? And why it's important to think about automating it. So this is how the process of reviewing documentation PR often looks like. We have an author who raises the PR and a reviewer, a human. There is often waiting, and then there's a friendly reminder, a gentle reminder. We writers are actually pretty good at, asking people gently to, hey, don't forget about me. There's something that needs review. So then when we send that reminder, there's another waiting period while contents of the PR. And what that means is that we are checking style guides. More than one style guide. Our largest one, the IBM style guide, has over 400 pages, so that can be a lot of checking. And that contains various style rules that we actually are required to follow. And then that reviewer writes down the feedback, writes down more feedback, so that takes time. And then there's a conversation where the author of the PR might ask, well, why am I supposed to use this wording and not my wording? And then again, style guide is checked, copy pasted, things are explained, and so on. It can be a long process. So that was sort of my mission. And less time in this process, less time reviewing PRs, so that we have more time for the fun things. And the fun in this case is that sort of like deep dive conversation about whether this actually fits a user's use case, whether this corresponds to any job to be done, and so on, rather than keep discussing whether this particular sentence should be using the words by using or just using. So another look at this diagram. This is the full process that we have now. So in theory, what could be time and effort? This would be my theory, like the state first waiting period, because they immediately get at least some actionable feedback immediately after raising that PR. That's where the automation part can come in. If I raise a PR, I want to see some actionable comments right now so that I can spend some time working while a human is getting ready to review as well. So let's break this theory. The first stage that I went through was thinking about whether I could use the AI tools that we have available to automate those PRs reviews. I'm not sure if I mentioned the term AI review bot yet, but that's the tool that I wanted to try. And basically an AI review bot, I'm sure many of you have encountered those. That's an automated assistant that uses an LLM to analyze the content of a PR and provide some feedback. So an author of a PR like me raises a PR, and then the AI bot comes in immediately, posts some questions. That's exactly what a human reviewer would do, except that it happens instantly. And necessary disclaimer, just like with many AI tools, the quality of varies based on the quality of the LLM under it. So I'll share the tool that I personally used was Sorcery AI, because that's okay. I know, yeah. I chose this tool because for open source projects, so that was my reason. And now to show some of the comments that it posted on my PRs that I use for testing. This was a test PR where I tried to introduce passive voice, which is writers. And what I really liked here is that after providing the instruction to avoid passive voice, the AI review bot actually went one step further and didn't just tell me that this is passive voice, but also suggested how to reword my original sentence, which is something that I personally struggle with sometimes, maybe because I'm not a native speaker, I don't know, but it can be tricky to do that. So that's what I appreciated. Another comment that I found really useful was when I asked the bot to clarity. And again, it found a case where I used the word configured in a way clear. And again, the bot suggested how to make that sentence better and clearer. So I think that's a pattern that might be starting to emerge right now, that AI review bots are useful for actually coming up with suggestions for improvement. Now, in another example that I have, I tried to ask the bot for a very specific instruction to tell me whether, or to notify me when that documentation update describes the product from a feature point of view, rather than something that we should keep in mind as technical writers in Foreman. And yeah, it did. It found an instance where there is a sentence that just describes commands rather than what those commands do and why a user should even use that. So again, a useful suggestion. However, keep in mind that those useful examples that I shared were really cherry-picked from a vast number of comments that I saw. And most of the other comments were not actually that useful. And there's like a lot of them. If there's one thing we can say about AI tools is that they do like to talk a lot. They're very chatty. They will tell you a lot of things. And in the end, I and some of my colleagues have started feeling overwhelmed by just the sheer amount of comments we were seeing. And that's not good, because if you're seeing so many comments every time you post something, it might actually numb you as an author, because you just stop caring, maybe. There's so much content for you to process that it's too much. And it requires a lot of mental effort. And no matter how valid those comments are, they will eventually tire you out. So I see that as a big issue of these. And actually, some open source communities are also facing this problem on a whole different scales. There are projects where you have an AI bot that opens a PR, and that bot can open 50, 100 PRs, but there's a human reviewer that needs to review them. And again, it's a lot of mental effort, a lot of mental overhead that can contribute to exhaustion or burnout. And there's one more, yeah. So if I were to summarize this, the benefit of using AI review bots for documentation is that they are capable of very advanced text processing. That was the thing where I mentioned that it gives you suggestions. There's not something that, for example, static analysis tools that I'll be talking about next can do. And those tailored suggestions, those are really useful when they're right and when there's not too many of them. The disadvantages of using these tools is obviously they're expensive. There's a lot of computing power, environmental impact, societal impact, all those things. They might be a bit invisible when you're behind a keyboard using those tools, but they're still there. And also the thing about mental effort, because you're basically constantly reviewing somebody else's review, and that's always, well, okay, not always, but often that's even more exhausting than writing that thing yourself. I'm sure you know that. AI feedback fatigue, that's how I called that, the fact that you have so many comments all the time. And lack of commitment is something that I'm observing too on my side, because whenever a human reviewer, like any of you would share comments on my PR, I would actually feel responsible to, interact with you to come to a conclusion. But when I know that it's just, a machine behind those comments, it's very easy to dismiss them. So that's also something to keep in mind.
What's the benefit? It's kind of, yeah, like I don't think it's like
We might actually get to that later. So we also have other tools, AI-free tools that can do similar job without AI. In our project, in Foreman documentation, we are currently using Vale, which is a linter, which is a tool that does linting, which is a process of ensuring that text adheres to style norms, which is something that we really can find useful in the documentation world. The way it works is that, again, I raise a PR, and then there is Vale, so that linter that checks the diff of that PR. And this is not based on AI analysis. This is based on very precisely defined rules, think regular expressions or scripts that process the text and look for predefined patterns in text. So, for example, this is a rule, this is an error that resulted from a rule that checks for whether we're adhering to the one sentence per line rule, which we have in our repo. That's to make sure that each sentence is written on its own line. And again, there is a simple regular expression behind it, and it gives me, this particular rule needs some tweaking. We know about that. We have a bug for it. But when we get it ready, it will actually reliably report the errors. And I know that I can trust those errors because they're defined by a regular expression. That's very transparent, unlike with an AI tool where I would need to be constantly mindful of the fact that it can produce inaccurate results. This is just one of the many examples where Vale rules can be applied. We also have another rule that will count the number of words in sentences, which is also another style rule that we are recommended to follow. Every sentence should be 32 words or less. And we do have people who use AI tools to count sentences. And work, I think that AI tool will just write a script to check the words in that sentence. But also AI's technology is currently notorious, for not being able to do, asking it to do any kind of counting can be overkill. So again, this is where a static analysis tool like Vale is a better fit. And with Vale, we can have many, many rules like that. It's a modular system, so very easy. Once we set it up, we can now add any rules that we want. It's just about finding the right regular expression or script to match the pattern that we want to avoid. So again, just like with, that should say without AI, that title. Well, never mind. So this summarizes the pros and cons of using a static tool like Vale. In our case, it's lightweight. There are not as many, resources behind it as AI tools. I like that the feedback it posts is uncontroversial because you can actually, with your team, define those rules beforehand. So if you agree that this is a rule that you should follow, you can define it in Vale, and then there's no controversy or arguing. And it's also transparent. However, it cannot do that kind of advanced context processing and suggestions that we saw with the AI tool. Again, a good example could be the passive voice thing that I shown before. Vale can look for verbs in passive voice, but can't give you suggestions on how to fix those, while an AI tool can. So that's experiments that we've been making in our project. And now what have we learned from those? The theory is that we could try to implement an AI review bot for things that cannot be described by a regular expression or a script, and things where we could appreciate a tailored suggestion or a rewrite. And Vale should still be used for anything that can be described by a regular expression or script, or anything where we don't need that tailored suggestion. So if we just need a generic error, hey, this is what you did, that's wrong, do this instead, that's enough, really. because theoretically, and some people might be tempted to do this, we could just throw AI at everything. But again, that might be overkill, might not give you precise results, and would of having to constantly check whether this is the right output or not. You have to basically all the time review somebody else's review, and that's not great. And yeah, with AI reviews, you just never know what you're getting, because it's basically a black box. What happens inside is not something that you can always determine. While with static tools, you have that database of rules and you can always investigate. You know what's going on and why it happened. So to summarize, in our project, we now have 2 tools to automate or help automate PR reviews, Vale and an AI review bot. I would say that that bot's future is uncertain, because, like I said, the amount of issues it reports is just too much. And my theory is that it's also because sorcery documentation is the tool that we tried because it was free, it was easy to set up, so we wanted to give it a try. But its LLM was trained on code and it's supposed to look for something else. So the question is, could we develop a tool that would be tailored to reviewing documentation? I think that would be really useful, but it's also not something that we have the resources or skill set to do right now. It could be a nice next step, though. Yeah, so that would be for next steps. Maybe if we want to continue using the review bot, we would need to refine it, or maybe just look for something else or develop something else. But for Vale, that has proved very useful. And actually, what I would like to see in the team is that every time a posts a comment notifying the author of an issue, both should start thinking, okay, this is true, and can we automate it? Can we actually write a Vale rule so that we don't have to report it again by writing it down and spending all that time? I think those would be really nice steps to take in our team. And to summarize this, or to, well, wrap it up, I would like to call out Yevgeny's blog post about using Codecrabbit, which is another AI review tool. His experience on using it in one of the engineering, really funny, much funnier than my presentation, and that's what inspired me to try sorcery for us. So I recommend reading that. And there are plenty of AI review tools out there. We use sorcery. There is that blog post that's about Codecrabbit. Cursor also has one. It's called Bugbot. So I encourage you to experiment with those and maybe share your lessons learned. And that would be it for me. Are there any questions? Yes?
I have a question about the AI reviewer.
Mm-hmm.
Why not to introduce some kind of rules for the AI? Let's say, I don't know if the sorcerer can do it, but let's say, check fail, but for the AI agent, you know, to basically tell it, check only this and ignore everything else.
Yeah.
If it's possible.
That's the part that I showed here. If you look at the part instructions, that's what I told the tool to do. I didn't try to tell it to ignore everything else. I'm not sure if it could, because again, sorcery is built to, I think, check the security issues in code primarily. This is adding instructions to it. From my point of view, it looked like a secondary feature. So it still produces output even when unprompted.
Mm-hmm.
So even when I shared like 3 third one, it would still find other issues just because it was trained in a way to share some comments. So that again might be just a sorcerer's limitation. And if we had a way to develop a custom tool that would be more lightweight, you know, more focused, this sort of thing could be possible.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Out of curiosity, how stable is the rule set for Vale?
What do you
Does
mean by
it change
stable?
a lot between versions?
Are there any versions with Vale? I mean,
Just sometimes updated when we add a new rule. Like The linter is a tool that accepts various rule sets.
You set up Vale in the repo, and then you tell it which rule sets to check against. So the way we have it set up is we have a Red Hat's style rule set that's just this big thing that uses a lot of rules from the IBM style guide. And we do update it. I don't think we do really versioning. Maybe we should. That's a good point. And now we also have a custom rule set for Foreman documentation. Again, we have not really thought about versioning.
I was thinking it was maybe a question like change of version, right? When
Yeah.
they change the way how to define the rule sets, you know.
In my mind, I mapped Vale to Robocop, which is a Ruby. Every single version they make changes the rules, and suddenly your code base isn't compliant.
Okay.
And it kind of sucks.
Problem for us.
The
We're
way-
using that for
We also don't run it like on the whole repo. We only run it on a diff of a specific PR. And we don't need to get a green check for merging. So we do have some sort of flexibility there and some sort of trust in the team.
Lucky.
And it's also natural language, right? So there is some flexibility inherent in that.
Mm-hmm. Does that answer the question?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes?
Have you enabled
Yes, yes. And that, you mean sorcery, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and that makes it very noisy.
Yeah. So pass your own predefined things like just review. It should be like when you open the PR, that should be like. So it could be one thing to try.
That's a good point. We would not have to use it by default. There's one practical issue there. The settings for fine for the Foreman organization. And right now in the Foreman RH Cloud repo, it's set to a comment on every PR, and we can't tweak that setting just for the Foreman documentation organization. That's one blocker. Another is, how many people would actually voluntarily call a bot to review their documentation? It's like, that's again the mental effort thing. Like if I know that I'm going to probably ignore most of the comments anyway, would I do it? To be honest, I'm not sure.
Yeah, like that's why like,
Mhm.
you will just comment what you want.
Yeah.
So you can trim it or customize.
Could be something to try, especially if we first coordinate with the organization owner, whether they would be willing to disable it, because really that's a problem that we can't fine tune it just on our side. But yeah, thank you for the suggestion. Any other questions? Okay.
A suggestion.
There is any difference.
Yeah. I wonder how efficient, because those tools are developed to review code. And I mean, reviewing documentation is similar as a concept, but we need to look for different things. So That would be like my thought. Like, would that be an overkill to use something that was trained with something and just hope for some useful output on our side? Is, you know. But yeah, there are a lot of tools out there. I like the concept of having some sort of feedback right away. It's just that, at least in our experiments, it proves tricky to get it just right and make it useful, and not just like, okay, there are some comments, I can ignore them, so let's move on. So any other questions? Okay, thank you everyone. And thank you for those questions and comments. It's always great to see some interaction after a talk, so thanks.